The entertainment world is in absolute chaos tonight, as a shocking leak from Mona Scott's secret project has sent the entire love and hip-hop community into meltdown. The kind of leak that nobody saw coming, one that allegedly exposes private conversations, behind-the-scenes manipulation, and explosive truths about K, Michelle, Kirk Frost, and Rashida that could change everything fans thought they knew. It started quietly, like a rumor whispered in the shadows, but within hours, social media had turned it into a wildfire. The hashtag #MonaLeak was trending worldwide, and fans were demanding answers. What exactly was on that tape? Was it really Mona's voice, talking about staging emotional chaos to boost ratings? Or was it something deeper, something that revealed how far producers and cast members would go to protect their image? One thing's for sure, the voices on that recording didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded scared, angry, and brutally honest. Sources close to the situation claim the footage came from a private vault of Mona's upcoming spin-off project, a confidential documentary meant to show the real behind Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. But somehow, that vault cracked open, and what spilled out wasn't just messy, it was explosive. According to one insider, Mona's been filming secret confessionals for months. Ones the network never approved. K, Michelle, Kirk, and Rashida all said things they probably regret. And now it's out there. Fans were left stunned when a 47-second audio clip began circulating late last night. In the clip, a woman alleged to be K, Michelle can be heard saying, "You think the show made me crazy? Nah, the show just showed the crazy that was already there." Another voice, sounding eerily like Rashida, fires back, "You're lying for cameras. Girl, stop it before I stop you." The audio ends abruptly with the unmistakable sound of someone, many believe Mona herself, yelling, "Cut the mic." But the damage was done. The internet had its teeth in the story, and within hours, even Kirk Frost's name was dragged into it. A blurred screenshot from what looks like a hidden camera surfaced. ALLEGEDLY, showing Kirk on a late-night phone call with a producer, saying, "You know Mona wants this drama, right? She told me to act like I was done with Rashida. That's how you get the story trending." The reactions have been nothing short of nuclear. Fans are torn, some defending Mona Scott as the mastermind of modern reality TV, others calling her manipulative, accusing her of playing God with people's lives. Meanwhile, K, Michelle, reportedly went live for 10 minutes before deleting it, her voice trembling as she said, "If y'all only knew half the things we had to do for that show, you'd stop watching right now." As the night goes on, speculation grows that VH1 executives are in emergency meetings, trying to control the fallout. One anonymous source claims Mona herself is furious, demanding to know who leaked the material. Others whisper that it wasn't an outsider at all, that someone close to her wanted revenge. So now the question is burning across every fan forum and gossip blog: what was Mona's real plan with this secret project? Was it just another show, or was it a confession, one she never meant for the world to see? Because if what's being said online is even half true, this might not just be another scandal. It could be the moment the entire love and hip-hop empire begins to crumble from within. And the worst part, the tape isn't even fully out yet. What's coming next could be 10 times worse. The night after the leak, everything felt different. The cast members who once shared glam chairs and stage lights were suddenly hiding behind locked doors and silence. Mona Scott was nowhere to be found, her phone off, her team on edge, producers whispering like soldiers before a storm. K, Michelle's team was the first to make a move. She called her assistant at 2 in the morning and said, "Get every contract out of my house." Now she knew the clip spreading online wasn't even the worst part. There was more. There were full tapes of private moments, recorded during what Mona called deep confessionals, the kind where the cameras stay rolling long after the director says cut. K, Michelle had trusted that footage would never see daylight. Now it was being sliced apart, shared, and twisted across the internet. Meanwhile, Kirk Frost was pacing in his garage, chain swinging against his chest, phone glued to his ear. The caller ID said Mona, but he didn't answer. He replayed the leaked audio 100 times, trying to figure out how anyone got hold of it. He remembered that night months ago when Mona had invited him and Rashida to a quiet meeting, no crew, no makeup, no VH1 reps, just a camera hidden in the corner, and Mona with her calm but sharp voice saying, "I want to capture the truth, Kirk. You've been playing TV husband for too long. It's time to show the real you." Back then, it sounded like an opportunity. But now he realized it was bait. Every word he said that night could ruin him. Rashida woke up that morning to over 50 missed calls and a wall of messages, fans asking if she really threatened K. Michelle, others calling her fake. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, eyes swollen from no sleep, and whispered, "This can't be happening again." She knew how social media worked. Once the fans turned on you, it was nearly impossible to come back from it. She texted Kirk, "Meet me at Frost Bistro. We need to talk." But when she got there, Kirk wasn't alone. Jasmine Washington was sitting across from him, the same Jasmine who had once blown their marriage apart. Rashida froze in the doorway, her heart pounding. Kirk looked up and tried to speak, but Jasmine spoke first. She said, "Mona called me too," she said. "She wants me to do an interview about what really happened between us." Rashida laughed bitterly. "So that's what this is about again. You both think I'm gonna sit here and let her turn my life into ratings?" Kirk slammed his hand on the table. "Calm down, this isn't what you think." But it was exactly what she thought. Jasmine crossed her arms and said, "You think you're the only one Mona used. She told me to cry on cue to make sure America hated me, and it worked. Now everyone thinks I'm some homewrecker. Well, she got her show renewed." Rashida leaned forward, eyes cold. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you got with my husband." Jasmine shot back, "Maybe your husband should have thought before he called me in the first place." The tension inside the restaurant was thick. Even the waiter stopped moving. Kirk buried his face in his hands, muttering, "This is getting out of control." Then his phone buzzed. Again, Mona Scott calling. This time he answered. Mona's voice was sharp. "Kurt, meet me at the studio. Now we have a problem?" Kirk asked. "What kind of problem?" And Mona said, "The kind that ends careers, if we don't fix it within hours." Inside VH1's Atlanta office, chaos reigned. Mona stood in front of a wall of monitors, each screen showing clips from her unreleased project, the one she called Unfiltered. The footage was never meant to air, she had promised the cast. It was for internal reference only, to study emotional arcs, to understand their growth. But now someone had stolen hours of it and edited it into a highlight reel of betrayal, tears, and secret deals. Her assistant tried to explain. "We traced the leak to an anonymous Dropbox. The link came from an old network email." Mona snapped back, "Find out who had access. I want names by morning." Meanwhile, Michelle went live again, this time for real, her voice shaking but fierce. She said, "I'm done protecting people. Y'all want to know the truth? Fine. Mona made us sign papers that gave her access to every bit of footage, even personal diaries. We thought it was therapy, but it was control." She paused, took a deep breath, and added, "I'm not scared anymore. If she wants war, she's gonna get it." Fans flooded the comments. Thousands of messages pouring in. Team Michelle trending within minutes. Hashtags like #TruthOverVH1 and #cancel Mona started climbing Twitter. When Mona saw the live, she slammed her laptop shut, whispering, "Damn it, Kimberly. Why would you do this?" She called the network's legal department immediately, but before she could speak, another call came through from an unknown number. A distorted voice said, "You can't stop what's coming." Mona froze. "Who is this?" she demanded. The voice chuckled, "You know me better than you think. Check your email." The line went dead. Seconds later, her inbox pinged with a new message, subject line, "Project Leak Part 2. Inside was a video thumbnail showing the unmistakable image of Kirk Frost in a studio booth, tears in his eyes, saying, "I never wanted to lie to Rashida, but Mona told me the truth doesn't sell." Back at Frost Bistro, Rashida's phone buzzed with the same email. She clicked it and gasped, "Kirk, you need to see this." She shoved the phone in his face, his stomach dropped. It was him, every word raw, unedited. The video spread like wildfire across Instagram, reposted by fan pages, gossip, blogs, and reality accounts. Within an hour, Kirk's name was trending alongside Mona's. Fans began posting old clips from past seasons, claiming they could now see the manipulation behind every storyline. Outside, the chaos cameras began swarming Kirk and Rashida's boutique, reporters yelling, "Is it true you staged your fights for TV? Did Mona make you day trying to hold a marriage that the world keeps tearing apart?" Then she got into her car, slammed the door, and drove off. Inside her office, Mona was already drafting a statement. She knew she needed to control the narrative before VH1 stepped in. She rehearsed lines in her head about misunderstanding, about creative editing, about context, but she also knew the fans weren't buying corporate apologies anymore. They wanted raw emotion, so she called a meeting with her inner circle, saying, "We need to show them the truth. We leak our own version, make it look like we're owning the story." Her assistant asked, "You mean leak more?" Mona nodded, her eyes sharp. "Exactly. We fight fire with fire." That night another video appeared online. This time it looked more polished, like a trailer. It began with Mona's voice saying, "In this business, truth and entertainment are two sides of the same coin." Then quick cuts of Michelle crying, Kirk looking guilty, Rashida slamming a door, Jasmine whispering into a mic, and Mona watching from behind the scenes. Fans went wild, calling it the most dramatic teaser in reality TV history. Some thought it was an official comeback. Others said it was damage control, but either way it worked. Everyone was watching again. The chaos had turned into marketing gold. Still behind the glamour there was fear. Michelle's lawyer sent cease and desist letters. Kirk stopped taking calls. Rashida refused to film any new content, and Mona couldn't sleep, her mind racing through years of secrets, contracts, betrayals. She had always controlled the story, but now the story was controlling her. As dawn broke over Atlanta, she whispered to herself, the empire's shaking, but it's not falling, not yet. What she didn't know was that the real explosion hadn't even started. The person behind the leak was someone she trusted, someone who had been beside her since the first episode, someone ready to expose everything she built from the inside. The morning after the trailer dropped, the entire internet was split in two. Half the fans thought it was a genius move, the other half swore Mona Scott had gone too far. People were dissecting every second of the leaked clips as if decoding hidden messages. Hashtags like #ProjectUnfiltered and #VH1TruthBomb trended for hours. By the time Mona stepped into her Atlanta studio, her phone had already buzzed with over 200 missed notifications. She looked exhausted, sunglasses hiding her eyes, but her voice was still firm when she told her assistant, close the blinds and lock the doors. Nobody gets in until we find who did this. At the same time, across town, Rashida sat in her car parked outside Frost Bistro, scrolling through her comments. Each post worse than the last, fans accusing her of being part of the scheme, calling her a liar, a puppet, a fake wife. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell them how real the fights were, how real the tears had been, but who would believe her now? Kirk stepped out from the back door, walked toward her car, and knocked softly on the window. She didn't look up. He said quietly, you saw the trailer, right? Rashida laughed bitterly. You mean the one where I look like the villain again? Yeah, I saw it. Kirk sighed. You know, that wasn't Mona's first cut. Somebody re-edited that footage to make us look crazy. Rashida turned to him, eyes wet with anger. Then who did? Because if it's not Mona, who else even has that footage? Kirk hesitated for a moment too long before saying, I think it's someone from her own team. Meanwhile, Jasmine Washington was doing her own damage control. Her phone was blowing up with interview requests from gossip sites. Everyone wanted her side of the story. She sat in her apartment scrolling through her notes, rehearsing what to say. She had been painted as the homewrecker for years. Maybe now she could finally flip the script, but deep down she was scared. She remembered how Mona had once told her, reality TV eats its young. If you're not careful, you'll be next. Jasmine whispered to herself, not this time. I'm not the victim anymore. She texted her friend, an influencer known for spilling industry secrets, and typed, I have something that'll break the internet. Back at VH1 headquarters, executives were panicking. The leak wasn't just bad press, it was a legal nightmare. Millions of dollars at stake, brand deals on hold, sponsors demanding explanations. One executive slammed his fist on the table, yelling, how did Mona let this get out? Another replied, she's saying it wasn't her, but honestly, who else could pull something like this off? They decided to suspend filming until further notice, but Mona wasn't ready to stop. She knew that silence would look like guilt. She sent out a group message to the main cast, including Rashida, Kirk, Jasmine, and Michelle, saying, meet me tonight. Studio 9, no cameras, just us by sunset. Everyone arrived, tension thicker than ever. Mona stood at the center of the empty set under harsh studio lights, her expression unreadable. She said, you all know why you're here. Somebody betrayed us. Michelle crossed her arms. Oh, now it's us, right? Last week, it was just you running damage control. Mona snapped back, don't start with me, Kimberly. You went live without context. You made me look like a manipulator. Michelle shouted, maybe you are one. Kirk stepped between them. This isn't helping. We need to figure out who leaked those tapes. Mona turned to him and said calmly, do you have any idea how that footage got out? Kirk shook his head, but Rashida wasn't buying it. She said, you've been way too quiet, Kirk. What aren't you telling us? Kirk looked down, rubbing the back of his neck, finally saying, there's something you don't know. Before he could continue, the studio doors swung open, and Jasmine walked in holding a small black drive. She tossed it onto the table and said, you're all blaming the wrong people. Mona frowned. What is that? Jasmine smirked. The rest of the footage. The stuff nobody's seen yet. Mona's face drained of color. Jasmine said, I got this from someone on your staff. They said you planned to use it for a docuseries called Truth Behind the Chaos. You told everyone it was cancelled, but apparently you were still editing behind our backs. Mona whispered. Who gave you that? Jasmine looked her dead in the eyes and said, the person sitting right next to you. Mona turned slowly to her assistant, who was trembling. She said softly, tell me that's not true. Her assistant's voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Mona shouted. What did you do? She replied, I sent one clip to a blogger just to get attention. I didn't think it would blow up like this, the room erupted. Michelle started yelling, "You ruined people's lives." Kirk slammed his fist on the table. "This is why you don't play with people's real pain." Rashida stood silent, tears streaming as Jasmine whispered, "This is the real show right here." Mona took a deep breath and said, "You have no idea what you've just done." She grabbed the drive and plugged it into the screen behind her. The footage flickered to life, showing unseen moments from their private interviews. Rashida confessing, "I can't tell where my marriage ends and the show begins." Kirk whispering, "I stay because leaving would break the brand." Michelle crying, saying, "Mona promised to protect me, but she only protected ratings." Jasmine shouting on set, saying, "They told me to act like I'm obsessed. I'm not, I just wanted to be seen." The silence after the video was deafening. Nobody moved. Finally, Mona spoke. "This is what we've built. Years of stories, lies, tears. It's ugly, but it's real. This is why people watch, because they see their own mess reflected back at them." Michelle stepped forward, shaking her head. "You keep saying it's about reflection, but it's manipulation." Mona shouted back, "You think I forced you to say those things? You volunteered. You wanted the fame, the spotlight. Don't play victim." "Now Kirk, cut in. Enough. This isn't about who said what anymore. This is about fixing it before everything crashes." Mona rubbed her temples, exhausted, and whispered, "We can fix it, but we have to stay united." That's when Rashida finally spoke, her voice calm but full of fire. "United? You mean the same way you united us when you turned our pain into profit?" "No Mona, this time we're taking control." She turned to Jasmine and said, "If you're gonna release something, make sure it's the full truth, not just pieces." Jasmine nodded and said, "Fine, then help me tell it." Mona looked between them, both realizing she was losing control. The people she made famous were now rewriting her story. Outside the studio, paparazzi flashes burst through the night. Word had already spread that the cast was meeting. The footage was leaking faster than they could contain it. Fans were live tweeting every update, speculating alliances and betrayals like a digital courtroom. Mona stepped out to make a call to her lawyer, but before she could dial, her phone rang again, a private number. When she answered, the voice on the other end said, "I told you this wasn't over." Mona froze. "Who is this?" The voice replied, "I'm the one who still has the final cut." Then the line went dead. Mona stood there staring into the darkness. The empire she built brick by brick was slipping through her fingers, and she could feel it, the control, the reputation, the respect, all fading into static and scando. She turned back to the studio, her face hardening again. "If they want a show, I'll give them a show, but this time it's going to be mine." She walked back inside, unaware that the next leak, scheduled to drop at midnight, would expose something even she never expected: her own confession, filmed years ago, that no one was ever supposed to hear. Mona didn't sleep that night. She sat in her office, surrounded by old hard drives and scripts. Papers scattered across the floor. The city outside her window was still alive, with gossip headlines flashing on every entertainment site. Michelle exposes Mona. Scott Kirk, Frost caught lying again. Rashida finally breaks silence, each story twisting the truth into something uglier. By the hour, Mona's phone buzzed nonstop, every ring a new problem. VH1 legal calling, network PR calling, her assistant crying on voicemail. But Mona ignored it all. Instead, she pulled out one old drive marked Confessionals, Raw 2019. She hadn't looked at it in years. Back when she believed her cast would still trust her, she plugged it in and watched the screen flicker to life. Grainy footage of a dark studio. Michelle sitting in front of the camera, makeup smudged, voice trembling. She said, "Sometimes I feel like this show owns my life. Mona always says pain makes good TV, but at what cost?" The next clip was Kirk speaking quietly, "I know the world thinks I'm the bad guy, but half the time the drama's scripted. I can't even tell what's real anymore." Then Rashida appeared, eyes red, whispering, "I don't know if I love Kirk, or if I just love the idea of not losing to Jasmine." Mona paused the video, her heart sinking. These weren't scenes for ratings, these were real confessions, real pain. She had told herself she was capturing authenticity, but looking at it now, she realized she'd been exploiting it. Across town, Jasmine was meeting with a blogger in a dimly lit diner, her laptop open, showing the drive she'd brought earlier. The blogger leaned forward, eyes wide. "You're telling me there's more?" Jasmine nodded. "This isn't just drama, it's a full cover-up. Mona's been filming us off contract without disclosure. She calls it emotional continuity, but it's illegal." The blogger grinned. "You realize if we publish this, it'll destroy her?" Jasmine took a deep breath and said, "Maybe it's time someone did." She hit send on an email that would send shockwaves across every gossip page. Within hours, by morning, a new video was live titled Mona's Confession: The Unseen Truth. It started with footage of Mona herself sitting in a producer's chair, looking straight into the camera, saying, "I know what people say about me, manipulative, heartless, ruthless, but this business isn't for the weak. If I didn't control the chaos, The chaos would control me. The clip was old, clearly recorded years ago, but out of context. It looked like an admission of guilt. Social media went wild. Mona's words were looped, edited, and memed into oblivion. Fans declared it proof that she'd orchestrated everything. The comments were vicious. Cancel Mona trending. #1 in less than 2 hours. Rashida watched the chaos unfold from her store office, hand trembling as she scrolled through posts. Kirk walked in and said quietly, "It's worse than before. They're saying VH1's pulling her contract." Rashida looked up and said, "Maybe they should. Maybe we all need a break." Kirk shook his head. "You really think they'll stop this machine? It's too profitable." She glared at him. "So, you're fine with being their puppet forever?" Kirk snapped back. "Don't act like you didn't benefit too." Rashida stood up, voice rising. "Benefit you? Call public humiliation a benefit? You call reliving the same betrayal for years good TV?" Kirk turned away. "I call it survival." The room fell silent except for the buzz of her phone. Another notification. A tweet from Michee that read, "I warned y'all, she's been taping us." Without consent, guess who's next? Mona saw the tweet and felt her stomach twist. She knew Michee wasn't bluffing. She had more footage, years of it stored somewhere. Mona opened her drawer, pulled out a small locked box. Inside was a single USB labeled contracts and control. It contained every net agreement, every waiver, every form of leverage she'd ever used. She held it tightly, whispering, "They won't destroy me over one mistake." She called VH1's head of programming. When he answered, his tone was cold. "Mona, we're putting production on hold indefinitely. The board's deciding whether to terminate your deal." She tried to sound calm. "You can't cut me. I built this empire," he replied. "You built it on chaos, and now it's collapsing." Outside her window, a small group of paparazzi had gathered, shouting her name. Mona shut the blinds and slumped into her chair for the first time in her career. She didn't know what to do. She had fought off scandals before, but never one this personal. Then her phone rang again, this time a familiar voice on speaker. It was Stevie J, one of her oldest cast members. He said, "Mona, I've seen the leaks. They're destroying you, but you gotta flip it. Use it to your advantage. You're the queen of turning pain into a plot twist." Mona gave a small laugh, the first one in days. "Maybe you're right," she said, "maybe. It's time to tell the truth my way." Within 24 hours, Mona had arranged an exclusive interview with a major entertainment outlet. It would be live, raw, unfiltered. Her plan was simple: own the narrative before someone else did. When the cameras rolled, she sat across from the host, calm, composed, dressed in all white. The host wasted no time asking Mona, "Are the leaked tapes real?" Mona took a breath and said, "Yes, they're real, but they're also out of context. Those confessionals were never meant for the public. They were part of an experimental project to show emotional reality beyond the edits. I never forced anyone to say anything." The host leaned forward. "But, did you film cast members without their knowledge?" Mona hesitated, then replied, "No. Never without legal consent. What you're seeing online are stolen and manipulated fragments." The internet exploded again, but this time reactions were mixed. Some fans started defending her, saying she looked sincere. Others called it performative damage control. Michee wasn't convinced. She posted another live video saying, "Funny how she only talks when the money's threatened. Where was this honesty when we were breaking down backstage?" Jasmine added fuel to the fire, tweeting, "There's a part 2 coming tomorrow." Mona saw the posts and muttered under her breath, "They still think they can play me." She called her editor and said, "Leak the director's cut. Show them what they don't know." The editor hesitated. "Are you sure that footage could bury everyone?" Mona said, "Exactly, it's time. They remember who made them famous." The next morning, a massive upload appeared under an anonymous account labeled Unfiltered Truth Part 2. It wasn't just raw footage, it was chaos incarnate: shouting matches, private arguments, off-camera breakdowns, Kirk throwing a mic, Rashida crying in a dressing room, Jasmine screaming at producers, Michee storming off set. But what stunned everyone most was a scene showing the four of them sitting together, comforting each other between takes, proving that beneath the drama there was real connection, real pain. The audience didn't know what to believe anymore. Comments flooded in. Maybe Mona wasn't the villain, maybe everyone was the victim in their own way. As the dust began to settle, Mona looked at the screen, her eyes glassy. She whispered, "Maybe this is what authenticity really looks like, not the edited version, the raw, the messy, the human." She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, but before she could exhale, her assistant burst in, pale and shaking. "Mona, you need to see this. Someone just leaked your personal voicemail log." Mona's blood ran cold. She grabbed the phone, scrolling through the new post, and froze when she heard her own voice saying, "If they ever turn on me, I'll make sure the whole world knows their secrets." It was the final nail in the coffin. The betrayal was complete. and the empire she'd built was crumbling faster than she could rebuild it. The next morning felt like waking up inside a storm. Nobody knew how to be calm anymore. Every notification on every device was a new accusation, a new clip, a new edited meme. The morning shows wanted statements, the sponsors wanted reassurances, and the fans wanted blood. Mona paced her kitchen with a mug. She didn't remember filling. Her assistant hovered by the counter, eyes red from lack of sleep. "We need a plan," Mona said quietly, and then louder. "We need narrative control before the network decides for us." Michelle posted a thread that read like a declaration. She wrote about consent, about exploitation, about how the machinery of reality TV consumed people and left them hollow. The thread was shared by millions and painted Mona as the architect of a system that sold human heartbreak for entertainment. The comments were split, but the momentum swayed toward outraged. TV hosts began asking whether this was a larger industry problem than a single scandal, and the word accountability trended for hours. Rashida watched the eruption and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Clarity. She called her sister, and for the first time in a long time she talked not for the cameras but for herself. She said, "I don't want to be defined by what someone edits of me anymore." She booked a quiet villa out of town for a week and texted Kirk, "I'm leaving to breathe." He didn't respond right away, which only made her heart clench more than any headline could. Kirk, meanwhile, sat in an empty rehearsal space staring at the floor. A documentary filmmaker he'd once admired sat down across from him and said, "You can either run or you can tell the truth." Kirk rubbed his temple. "I've been acting for so long," he admitted, whispering into the space that the line between performance and life had faded. The filmmaker suggested a recorded interview, raw, unfiltered. No producers, no prompts, just Kirk and a camera for an hour. The idea terrified him, but also felt like a relief. The next day, a clip of Kirk walking into the makeshift studio surfaced on fan pages. He looked smaller than he'd ever looked on camera. Jasmine used the chaos like sunlight through blinds. She reached out to former cast members and influencers, offering them the drive she possessed. She promised to give them access to the stories they deserved to tell in full, not in bite-sized rage clips. She crafted a message. "If you were manipulated, if you signed away your voice, join us and we will build a platform where the whole truth is heard." The response was electric. Several smaller creators signed on, offering to host live sessions to discuss the leaks and the system that produced them. VH1's legal team drafted a statement simultaneously with a threat letter. The dual approach of appeasement and aggression. The network insisted it followed the law and that any leaked material was stolen property. It warned about legal consequences for releasing or possessing confidential footage, but the internet doesn't care for legalese when there's drama to consume. Fans shared the letter with snark and contempt, interpreting it as proof that money mattered more than people. In a quiet corner of town, an investigator Mona hired months ago to look into a different rumor sat at his desk reviewing metadata. He traced the anonymous Dropbox link to a VPN and then to an account used by someone inside the production company, someone who had access to the vault of footage, someone with technical know-how and motive. The investigator narrowed his list down to 3 people. He called Mona with a single sentence. "It's internal." She closed her eyes and whispered, then she knew what she'd been dreading. Betrayal wasn't an accident. Michelle's live interviews became cultural events. She spoke about therapy, about how producers would frame grief into plot points, about the toll of reliving trauma for a shot at fame. She said, "Sometimes we thought we were healing, but we were being rehearsed to hurt the audience into carrying the empathy." In her voice made parts of the fandom shift. She began receiving messages from former reality stars who said, "Thank you for saying this out loud. We were scared to before, but you made it safe to speak." Rashida's villa was a place of quiet confrontation. She invited Jasmine and Kirk to talk because she believed the only way forward was through honesty, not weaponized clips. They sat around a wooden table late into the night. The conversation was raw. Kirk apologized more than once for his cowardice, for staying silent, for letting narratives be written without his consent. Jasmine admitted she had felt used and that sometimes playing the villain was easier than being ignored. Rashida listened and said, "I forgive, but I don't forget. We forged a fragile pact that none of them would speak to the press without all agreeing beforehand, but secrets are like water, they find cracks." Mona's inbox pinged with one more message, a new clip with the words "Final Cut" attached. The thumbnail made Mona's stomach drop. It showed a private dinner where Mona sat across from a man with a hushed voice saying, "If we can't control the story, we redirect it, and if that fails, we escalate the spectacle." The clip made it sound like Mona admitted to manipulating narratives for ratings. The audio was grainy and open to interpretation, but interpretation is king in the court of public opinion. The cast convened again, this time with lawyers present. Michelle's attorney demanded to know who had access to footage and why consent forms were ambiguous. Mona's lawyer fired back that releases were signed, that confidentiality is standard practice, and that anyone who distributed stolen property would be prosecuted. The back and forth played like a slow-burning fuse online, with commentary panels dissecting every legal argument like sports analysts debating a game plan. The public spectacle of private legalities felt grotesque to some and fascinating to others. As midnight approached, a new account posted something different, a sit-down video titled "The Backstage Tapes." The truth: they didn't want you to hear the footage, wasn't an edited montage. This was a sequential upload, hours of behind the scenes, not just the charged moments but the quiet ones too. Late-night conversations, someone humming to calm a crying castmate, producers offering water, a cast member telling a joke that made everyone laugh. The world watched, and many began to feel conflicted. If manipulation existed, so did genuine care. The lines blurred again. Inside the chaos, a smaller, more personal crisis began to unravel. Mona's elderly mother read a headline in the paper and called her daughter crying. "Why are people saying these things about you?" she asked. Mona tried to explain the industry vernacular, the need for tension, and the moral gray zones, but words sounded hollow over the phone. Her mother asked why no one appreciates the work she did to support so many families. Mona realized the cost of an empire is often paid by those closest to UK. Michelle was approached by a documentary filmmaker representing a major platform. They wanted to give her a platform to tell the whole story in exchange for executive control. She hesitated. The irony wasn't lost on her. Another producer offering to monetize her trauma for truth. The offer came with clauses that required edits and approvals. She declined, saying, "I won't trade one master for another," but she suggested a different model: collective narration, where multiple cast members would control their segments, a coalition of voices. Instead of a single narrative voice, the coalition grew. Small creators, former contestants, activists who campaigned around consent in media. They drafted a public letter demanding industry-wide reform, transparency in how footage is stored, access to raw materials for cast members, clear consent definitions, and the abolition of punitive clauses that forbade speaking publicly about production practices. Their letter used legal language, but it hit social networks with emotional force. This was no longer gossip. It was a movement. VH1 felt the pressure. Sponsors quietly paused ad deals. Certain brands didn't want to be associated with the controversy. A few bold sponsors stood by the network, but the shaken financial ecosystem forced executives into emergency talks with advertisers. They began discussing a long-term strategy: rebuild trust, commission an independent audit, and publicize policy changes. But inside those meetings, a more vulnerable conversation was happening. Executives were asking whether the model that made reality TV profitable was sustainable if the public demanded ethical accountability. The leak's origin remained murky until a break in the case. A junior editor, someone who held the late-night keys to the vault, was found sobbing in a stairwell by a friend. She confessed she had downloaded files to a personal drive, not to sell them, but to protect them from what she considered reckless handling by high. She said she wanted to expose the manipulation, not to destroy lives, but to spark reform. Her motivations were messy and human, and the story of a whistleblower complicated the public's appetite for pure villains. That night, the junior editor agreed to an on-camera conversation conducted by an independent journalist. She sat nervously, hands clasped, explaining how she had watched pieces of people's lives be reshaped into plot devices. She wanted to give them back their context, but she had underestimated the internet's appetite for bite-sized outrage. She had hoped to start a conversation, not a witch hunt. The segment was nuanced, and many who watched felt a shift. Sympathy moved into the field, and people began to ask harder questions about responsibility. Yet for every sympathy thread, there was another accusation. A fan page dug up an old interview where Rashida had joked about ratings and tears and used it as evidence that the cast participated willingly. The internet, as ever, loved binary narratives, and long-form complexity made for less satisfying content than a 10-second clip that screamed betrayal. The emotional tug-of-war continued, and the cast's private lives were stretched thin in the eye of the storm. Mona made a decision she felt she had to make. She would host a roundtable, an unscripted, live conversation with cast members, producers, legal advisors, and an independent moderator. No edits, no cuts. Every question allowed. She sent invitations and prepared mentally for public reckoning. She told herself it was time to show her side, and also to listen with humility. What she didn't know was whether the world would accept a messy conversation when it had been fed drama for years. As the production team prepared the live roundtable, Someone uploaded a file titled The Final Confession. The thumbnail suggested intimacy. A shaky camera angle. A voice barely above a whisper. A name uttered that could unravel reputations further. Mona saw the thumbnail and felt a chill. The clock ticked toward an uncertain hour, and the entire world tuned in ready for the next act. Some for redemption, others for ruin. As the clock struck 8, the livestream began. Tens of thousands tuned in within seconds. The chat flooded with emojis, demands, questions, accusations. The frame opened on a dark studio, a single circular table under warm lights. Mona Scott sat in the middle, wearing black, no makeup glam, no scripted introduction, just raw silence to her right. Michee arms folded, eyes sharp across from her. Rashida composed, but clearly nervous. Kirk next to her, expression unreadable. Jasmine at the far end, leaning back, trying to look relaxed, but her fingers tapped restlessly against the table. A moderator, a respected journalist, introduced the event tonight for the first time ever. The people behind the chaos speak unedited. Mona took a deep breath, leaned toward the mic and said, I built something meant to give people a voice, and somewhere along the way, I became the villain of my own story. I want to understand how it got here. Michee cut in instantly. You don't have to understand, you just have to admit you made money off pain. Mona looked at her steady. I did, and so did you. We all did. We turned emotions into episodes, but I never wanted it to destroy anyone. Michelle's voice cracked. You told me crying cells. You said audiences feel closer when they see tears. Mona nodded softly. I did say that, and I hate that it's true. Rashida spoke next. Her tone calm, measured. I don't hate you, Mona. I hate the version of myself I became on your set, the one that smiled through humiliation. Because I thought protecting the brand meant protecting myself. Kirk glanced at her, surprised. She continued, I let the world judge me because I was scared that if I stopped being the perfect wife, I'd be nothing. Kirk shifted uncomfortably, then spoke. It wasn't just her fault. We all played the game. I acted like the unfaithful husband because it got attention. I did interviews, I sold merch off it, and I told myself it was worth it, but now I can't even remember the last time I was seen as a person. The moderator asked Jasmine, what about you? Jasmine leaned forward, eyes glinting with old anger. I came in thinking it was my shot to be known not as a background girl, but as someone with a story. I thought Mona saw me. She did, but she saw a character first and a woman second. Every time I tried to tell my truth, they edited it into obsession. So yeah, I leaked that drive because I wanted people to see that the villain cried. To the room went silent. Mona stared at her. You leaked it? Jasmine nodded, unflinching. I did, and I'd do it again because maybe it's the only thing that made you listen. The moderator let the silence hang before asking, what now? Mona exhaled slowly. I can't undo the past, but I can stop pretending it didn't happen. I should have built boundaries, and I didn't. I should have protected you from each other and from the machine. Jasmine asked quietly, are you saying you're sorry? Mona looked her in the eye. Yes, and not the kind of sorry that comes with a press release. I mean it. Michee wiped a tear, but laughed bitterly. Words don't fix contracts, baby. Mona smiled sadly. No, but maybe transparency can. The moderator opened the floor to the live audience. Fans began submitting questions. One read, do you regret doing reality TV at all? Michee said, I regret not having control. I don't regret the platform. Rashida added, I regret letting producers define my worth. Kirk said, I regret believing ratings meant success. Jasmine paused before saying, I regret losing myself to a storyline. Mona said softly, I regret not realizing sooner that success built on broken people isn't success. The chat exploded with heart emojis and applause, reactions, some skeptical, others emotional. The moderator pressed on, asking Mona what happens after tonight. Mona looked into the camera. If the network wants to end my deal, that's fine. If fans want to walk away, that's fine, but the footage, the rights, the profits, they should go back to the people who lived it. I'm giving full licensing rights to every cast member, effective immediately. The room froze. Michelle's jaw dropped. Rashida blinked. Kirk muttered, wait, are you serious? Mona nodded. It's time you own your stories. Backstage, VH1 executives watching from monitors were thrown into chaos. Legal teams scrambled. Producers shouted at assistants. This wasn't approved, but it was live. They couldn't cut the feed. The audience reaction was overwhelming. Thousands of tweets poured in, calling it the most powerful unscripted moment in TV history. Some called it redemption, others called it too late, but everyone was talking again as the stream continued. Mona took off her mic and stood. She looked around the table saying, I started this show to give people visibility, not to take it away from them. We got lost chasing moments that broke souls. I'm done doing that. She turned to leave, but Michee stood up and said, wait. Mona stopped, turned back, and for a moment, They just stared at each other. Michelle extended her hand. Let's at least end this chapter right. Mona hesitated, then took it. The audience watching online went wild. After the feed cut to black, the studio stayed quiet for a long time. Jasmine whispered to herself, maybe we just filmed the realest episode ever. Rashida laughed a little through her tears. Kirk nodded. Maybe that's what Mona wanted all along. Mona sat down again, her hands shaking not from fear but from release. She said softly, maybe now we can start something new, but outside the studio. The story wasn't done. A breaking news alert flashed across screens moments later. Exclusive unseen files surfaced from Mona Scott's Vault Part 3 coming. Midnight fans flooded back. Online threads exploded again. The moderator's phone buzzed with a message from a private number. It read, "You thought that was the end? This is just the beginning." Attached was a thumbnail of Mona herself, in a recording booth labeled the confession tape. The journalist stared at it in disbelief, realizing the next act was already in motion. Mona's team saw the alert. She slumped against the wall, whispering, how much more is there to leak? Her assistant whispered back, maybe everything she ever filmed. She looked around at the cast still in the room, their faces tired but strangely united. She said, I don't know who's doing this, but if they want a show they're about to get one, only this time, it's all of us telling it together. The others nodded. Michelle smirked. You mean we team up? Mona smiled faintly. Yeah. Maybe for once, the plot twist belongs to us. As cameras outside flashed and reporters shouted questions through the night, something had shifted for the first time in years. They weren't just characters in someone else's narrative. They were collaborators in rewriting it, and somewhere out there the person behind the leaks watched from a dark screen, smirking as the upload bar for the next file reached 99%, because in the world Mona Scott built, the drama never ends, it only evolves. The file hit the internet just before sunrise, its thumbnail grainy, its title simple, Mona Scott confession tape. Within minutes it exploded across every platform. Hashtags reignited feeds, flooded with reaction videos and commentary accounts screaming that the queen of reality TV had finally been caught. The video opened with static, then Mona's unmistakable voice, calm, low, almost weary. She said, you ever build something so big that it starts to own you instead of the other way around? The camera panned slowly, revealing her sitting alone in a sound booth. Dated 3 years ago, she continued, everyone thinks I control everything, but the truth is I lost control a long time ago. It wasn't a scripted apology, it was a private moment recorded when she thought no one was listening. She spoke about contracts, about how she'd convinced networks to greenlight stories by promising emotional truth even when it meant bending people's lives. She admitted, I told myself it was art, but sometimes it was manipulation. I justified pain because pain sold, and for that I am haunted. You could hear her voice break halfway through. She whispered, I wanted to stop, but every time I tried the ratings climbed higher, and I thought maybe this is what legacy looks like. Maybe legacy is just damage that gets good press. The world froze that morning. Fans who'd spent weeks vilifying her suddenly didn't know how to feel. Some called it fake, others said it was the first real thing she'd ever done. Within hours, journalists were dissecting every sentence. Analysts on morning panels debated whether it was redemption or exposure, but the cast's phones were blowing up faster than anyone's. Kirk saw it first, then sent it to Rashida. She played it on speaker in the kitchen, tears running silently. Jasmine saw it trending and just sat still, staring at her phone, whispering, she really said it. Michelle watched alone in her apartment, her expression unreadable. When it ended, she simply said, damn. VH1's headquarters descended into chaos. Executives yelling at assistants, demanding to know who had access to that recording. It wasn't supposed to exist in public. The network's president called Mona directly, his voice cold and furious. Do you realize what you've done? Mona said quietly. I didn't leak it. He shot back. It doesn't matter, you've burned the brand. But Mona wasn't scared anymore. She said, then maybe it's time to build a new one, and hung up. Hours later, Mona held an emergency meeting with the core cast at a private studio. No cameras, no press. She looked exhausted but focused. She said, the confession's out now and it changes everything. People can twist it, but I'm not hiding anymore. Michelle crossed her arms. So what now? You start another show? Mona shook her head. No, we start something different. We take what they used against us, and we make it ours. Rashida frowned. Ours how? Mona said. Ownership, real ownership, not the kind on paper, the kind that means nobody edits your pain but you. Jasmine looked skeptical and said, you think the world still wants to hear from us? Mona smiled faintly. They always will. People love a comeback. Kirk leaned forward. What's the plan? Mona took out a folder, slid it across the table. It contained the proposal for a streaming docuseries called Reality Uncut, produced collectively by the cast, each with creative control. Michelle flipped through the pages, reading aloud. This isn't just about behind the scenes, this is about rewriting the rules, Mona nodded. Exactly, no more puppets, no more secrets. The room was quiet for a moment before Rashida said, I'm in. Jasmine hesitated, then said, if we do this, it has to be truth, not another performance. Mona replied, that's the point. Kirk agreed, fine. Let's show them who we really are. Michelle looked at Mona and said, if you're lying again, this will finish you. Mona said, I know, that's why I'm not. As news broke that they were reuniting, the internet lost its mind. Some fans celebrated, others rolled their eyes, calling it another marketing stunt, but interest skyrocketed anyway. Major streaming services reached out with offers. Everyone wanted the exclusive. Mona refused to rush. She said, we control the timeline, not them. The following week, a teaser appeared across social platforms. A black screen with white text reading, every story has two sides. This time, you'll hear ours. The clip cut to audio snippets, laughter, tears, and Mona's voice saying, no producers, no filters. Just truth. It became the most anticipated project in months. Interviews poured in, but something unexpected happened. The tone online started shifting. Fans began discussing exploitation ethics in entertainment therapy for reality stars. Forums that once tore people apart started hosting serious conversations about media manipulation. University blogs wrote essays about authenticity in performance. The chaos had somehow turned cultural. VH1 tried to salvage their image. They announced an internal investigation and new cast care initiatives. But it felt too late. Audiences were moving on. The old empire was crumbling while a new one was forming around Mona and the people she once directed. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The night before Reality Uncut was set to release, Mona found herself alone again in her office, the same sound booth from the leaked tape. She turned on the mic and said softly, if anyone finds this someday, I just want it known, I never hated my cast, I loved them too much to let them stay small, and maybe I went too far, but maybe that's what ambition does, it blurs lines. She paused, then smiled slightly and said, but this time, the story belongs to them, not me. When the first episode dropped the next morning, it opened not with drama, but silence. The camera lingered on each cast member sitting in natural light. No glam, no script. Mona spoke first, saying, this isn't a show, it's a reckoning. What followed was raw laughter, confrontation, reconciliation, long, unedited pauses where pain hung heavy, and unspoken. Fans wept as they watched. It felt less like entertainment and more like confession. Within 24 hours, the episode hit record numbers. Not because of scandal, but because of sincerity. Think pieces flooded in headlines, reading Mona Scott redefines reality. Michelle praised for vulnerability. Rashida and Kirk open up about rebuilding love. Jasmine Washington's redemption arc becomes symbol of self-agency for the first time in years. The fandom was united, not in gossip but in empathy. Mona watched the numbers climb, not with glee but quiet relief. She turned off her monitor and stepped outside, feeling the night air against her skin. Somewhere deep inside, she knew there would always be another leak, another headline, another storm, but for now, the noise had softened. The empire didn't end. It transformed. Still on an anonymous server somewhere, the final file waited, labeled Endgame, MP for unseen, unheard. A voice in the dark whispered, if they think the story's over, they haven't seen the real ending yet. The screen faded to black, leaving the audience wondering if the piece was real or just another setup for the next twist. Because in Mona Scott's world, the truth was never the end, it was just the next episode. Days passed, but the world still couldn't stop talking about Reality Uncut. The docuseries had flipped every expectation upside down. Critics called it a rebirth of authenticity, while fans flooded comment sections with messages like, this feels real. And for the first time, I actually believe them. Mona Scott had somehow turned what looked like the end of her empire into its reinvention. But what nobody knew was that behind her calm smile, something else was brewing. The mysterious file Endgame MP4 had started circulating in secret corners of the internet, on encrypted fan servers, invite-only chat rooms, and obscure rumor blogs. Whispers claimed it was the real ending to the Mona Scott saga, the part she didn't want anyone to see. Screenshots leaked of file fragments showing timestamps labeled Private Vault Session, VH1 Legal, and one ominous title, Rashida's Revelation. While the internet argued over whether the file was real or a publicity stunt, Mona met privately with her editor and longtime friend, Lauren. They sat in the same dark studio where her confession had been filmed. Lauren said, whatever's on that file, it wasn't uploaded from here. Mona leaned back in her chair, exhaustion written across her face. Then someone's still inside, she said quietly. Someone with access to everything. Meanwhile, Michelle was in New York promoting Reality Uncut on a morning show. The host asked if she trusted Mona again. Michee smiled, but her eyes didn't match. Trust is a process, she said. But I'll give her this, she faced her demons on camera, and that's something most people never do. Fans praised her for her grace, but minutes after the interview, she received a cryptic DM from an anonymous account. The truth she showed isn't the only one she filmed. Check your old emails. Back in Atlanta, Kirk and Rashida were rebuilding together this time. They'd turned Frost Bistro into a community hub, hosting small open mic nights and fundraisers. For once, there were no cameras, no scripts, but that piece was fragile. One night, as Rashida closed the register, Kirk came in holding his phone. "Babe," he said carefully, "you need to see this." He showed her a short clip, grainy, but unmistakable. It was her voice, recorded years ago in an offset interview, saying, "If Kirk ever leaves, I already know who he's going to." The clip cut off there, but the implication was explosive. Rashida froze. "Where did you get this?" Kirk said, "Someone sent it to me." Anonymous, same email domain from the first leak. Her heart sank. She whispered, "They're not done." Hours later, Mona's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She picked up, voice low. "Who is this?" A distorted voice replied, "I'm not your enemy, I'm your proof." The line went dead, followed by a text link, "Endgame, MP4. Mona stared at the screen for a long time before pressing play. The video opened with the familiar studio setup but a new angle, one she didn't remember being recorded. In the footage, she was sitting with a small group of producers. One man said, "You're playing with fire, Mona. If any of this leaks, it's over." Mona in the video replied, "Then we burn it all. Better to end it myself than let them destroy it for me." The video cut to black. She leaned back, whispering, "That's not possible." That footage was deleted. By dawn, the entire file had leaked. It spread faster than anything before. News outlets ran with headlines like "Mona Scott planned her own downfall." And the leak she predicted finally comes true. Conspiracy channels broke it, down frame by frame, arguing that she'd orchestrated the entire scandal as performance art. A meta-reality experiment to expose the toxicity of fame itself. Mona didn't deny it. When reporters asked for comment, she simply said, "Believe what you need to believe. Either way, you're still watching." Fans went wild. The ambiguity turned her from villain to enigma, the ultimate producer who blurred the line between victim, mastermind, and myth. Behind closed doors, the cast gathered one last time in a quiet studio. Mona arrived late, wearing all white again, carrying a small hard drive. She set it on the table and said, "This is everything. Every raw cut, every hidden clip, every unedited moment. It's yours now." Jasmine looked skeptical. "Why?" Mona smiled faintly. "Because I'm done playing God. The stories belong to the people who lived them." Michee crossed her arms. "And what about you?" Mona paused. "I'm writing a new one off camera this time." They sat in silence for a while before Rashida said softly, "Maybe this was the ending we all needed." Kirk added, "Yeah, messy, but honest." Jasmine laughed. "So basically, just like us." As they left the studio one by one, Mona stayed behind. She plugged in a recorder, hit record, and began to speak. People will call this redemption or manipulation. Maybe it's both. Maybe the truth is that the story never ends, it just keeps finding new narrators. If you're hearing this, remember, every reality you see was edited by someone, even your own. The screen faded to black. A week later, the reality uncut finale dropped, ending not with tears or chaos, but with silence. White text appeared on the screen, produced by everyone who lived it. It broke every record the network had ever set, but for the first time, there was no reunion episode, no aftershow, no leaks. Mona disappeared from the spotlight completely. Some said she'd retired, others swore she was working underground on a mysterious new project. Months later, a fan stumbled upon a new website, a plain black page with a single message. "The cameras never stop, only the stories do. Coming soon." No one knew if it was real or a hoax. But the world held its breath, because if Mona Scott had taught them anything, it was this: every ending is just another season waiting to begin. Weeks passed after the finale, and the world seemed to exhale at last. Gossip channels slowed down, timelines quieted, and for the first time in years, the names Mona Scott, Michee, Rashida, Kirk, and Jasmine weren't dominating every headline. The internet had found new obsessions, new scandals, but beneath the calm surface, whispers began again. The mysterious black website with the words, "The cameras never stop, only the stories do. Coming soon," had become a digital ghost story. Forums filled with speculation. Was Mona planning another show? Or was someone using her name to keep the chaos alive? One rainy afternoon, Rashida got a message from a private number with a simple attachment, a short clip. She pressed play and froze. It was her and Kirk in their restaurant, filmed just 2 weeks ago, from an angle she didn't recognize. Her voice on the recording was quiet but tense. "We can't keep pretending everything's fine for the public." Kirk's voice answered, "It's too late to stop pretending." She felt sick. The clip ended there. She called Kirk immediately. "Someone's filming us again," she said. Kirk sounded equally shaken. "That can't be. Rashida, there's no crew anymore." At the same time, Jasmine was in her apartment scrolling through fan emails when she saw a message titled "Unfinished Business." Inside was a single line. "Did you really think reality ever ends?" Attached was a short video of her walking into a studio, one she hadn't entered since the final meeting with Mona. The angle suggested hidden cameras were still rolling that night. Jasmine slammed her laptop shut, heart racing. Across town, Michelle received a handwritten note delivered by courier. It said, "The story is still being written. Check the drive you left in your old dressing room." She hadn't been near that set in months, but curiosity pulled her back. The studio was dusty, abandoned, but when she opened the drawer in her old dressing room, a small black USB drive sat waiting. She plugged it into her phone. On the screen appeared a folder labeled Season 0. Inside were dozens of files dated years before Love and Hip Hop ever aired. Meanwhile, Mona Scott was thousands of miles away in Jamaica. She'd been there since the finale, no press, no cameras, just peace. She was staying in a small villa overlooking the sea, trying to remember what quiet sounded like. She'd started journaling again, writing notes about everything that had happened. The empire that rose and fell and somehow rebuilt itself. But that afternoon, her assistant from Atlanta called. "Mona," she said, "something's wrong. People are saying a new trailer dropped." Mona frowned. "For what?" The assistant hesitated. "It's called Reality Uncut, Season 0, and it's uploaded from your old production account." Mona's blood went cold. She logged into her laptop, opened the browser, and there it was, a trailer with her logo, her branding, but not her work. The teaser opened with static, then a slow voiceover that sounded eerily like hers, saying, "Before there was fame. Before the edits. Before the lies. There was the truth we never showed." Quick cuts flashed across the screen, unseen footage, crying faces, dark hallways. One clip showed Mona herself whispering to a producer, "If anyone ever finds this archive, destroy it." The video ended with text that read, "Premiering in 7 days." Mona whispered, "Oh my God." She immediately called her lawyer. "Take it down," she demanded. "It's stolen property." But the lawyer sighed. "We've tried. It's not hosted on any known platform. It's mirrored everywhere. Even if we pull one version, 100 more appear." Back in Atlanta, Rashida met with Kirk and Jasmine in private. "Someone's got footage from the old vault," she said. Jasmine looked nervous. "Season 0. What is that?" Kirk rubbed his temples. "The stuff Mona shot before the pilot. Test tapes. Private screen tests. We weren't even under contract yet." Rashida's eyes widened. "You mean the stuff we filmed thinking it'd never air?" Kirk nodded grimly. The cast regrouped on a call that night. Mona's face appeared on the screen, lit by the blue glow of her laptop. "I don't know who's behind this," she said, "but that footage was supposed to be buried forever." Michelle said, "You're telling me somebody found everything? The auditions, the confessionals before we even signed?" Mona nodded. "And if that's true, then they have footage of me saying things that could ruin all of us." As the countdown ticked toward premiere day, the entire entertainment world held its breath. Blogs speculated that Season 0 was either a guerrilla marketing stunt or the biggest leak in television history. The cast received anonymous texts daily with cryptic messages like, "You thought you ended it. We're just pressing play." When the clock hit midnight, the video finally went live. Millions tuned in. The screen opened on raw handheld footage. No lighting, no music, just Mona's voice saying, "This isn't television yet. This is an experiment." What followed was unlike anything anyone had seen. Unfiltered footage of early casting calls, personal confessions, moments of doubt, real arguments, laughter, fear. The footage showed the birth of the empire, and the moral cracks that came with it. Fans were stunned. Some said it was haunting. Others called it art. Within 24 hours, Season 0 broke every streaming record, but it also triggered legal panic. Mona held a press conference from Jamaica, her face calm but her eyes heavy. "I didn't release this," she said. "Whoever did, they're showing pieces of something that was never finished. But maybe that's the point. Maybe reality was never supposed to be finished." The world exploded with theories. Was Mona secretly behind it again, playing the audience one last time? Or had someone truly hacked her legacy to expose her forever? A week later, the anonymous uploader released one final message. "There's no villain here, only authors." And then, silence. The site vanished overnight. Mona deactivated her social media. The cast disappeared from the public eye again. Reality Uncut ended, not with a finale, but with a question that nobody could stop asking. Was the leak the end of reality, or the beginning of truth? Months later, deep in the credits of a new documentary about media ethics, a single line appeared, produced anonymously by the collective, and fans still wonder, was that Mona's final project? Or just another illusion she left behind to remind the world that even when the cameras stop rolling, the story never really ends? Months had passed since Season 0 disappeared, but its echoes refused to fade. Clips still resurfaced on underground forums. Fan theories still filled the corners of Reddit, and phrases like the collective became part of pop culture slang. The world had moved on, at least on the surface. New shows filled screens. New scandals took over the gossip cycle. But the silence of Mona Scott remained louder than anything else. She had vanished completely. No appearances. No interviews. No posts. It was as if she had erased herself. And then, one night, something strange happened. On a quiet Tuesday, a push notification appeared on millions of phones at once. It wasn't from a network or a verified page. It came from an unnamed source, tagged only with a familiar logo, the Reality Uncut Flame. The message read, "1 year later, final truth, midnight." Every gossip blog, news outlet, and influencer went into meltdown. Was this Mona's return? Was the collective back? Within hours, #FinalTruth was trending globally. YouTube channels went live in anticipation. Even VH1, long separated from the franchise, issued a statement claiming they had no involvement. The world waited again. As the clock struck midnight, the stream began. Black screen. No intro, just faint breathing. Then, slowly, a light flickered on, revealing a familiar face. Mona Scott, older, calmer, her hair loose, no makeup, no polish. She was sitting in a simple wooden chair, the sound of waves faintly in the background. She looked straight into the camera and said softly, "You think you know how this story ends? You don't." She paused for a long time, letting the silence do the work. Then she continued, "People called me manipulative. They called me heartless. Maybe they were right, but they forget something. I didn't create the hunger for drama. I fed it. Because the audience wanted it. They wanted to watch pain, so I packaged it beautifully." She took a deep breath. "But somewhere along the way, I realized the story wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who lived it, tanned, everyone who watched it." The camera cut to old unseen footage. Rashida, Kirk, Jasmine, and Kay. Michelle in happier moments behind the scenes, laughing, eating, dancing between takes. It wasn't staged. It was human. Mona's voiceover continued. "We built an empire out of chaos, but it wasn't fake. It was just too real for television." Then the scene cut back to Mona. "After Season 0, I found out who leaked it. It wasn't the network. It wasn't an intern. It wasn't revenge. It was the cast themselves. All of them. Together." The revelation sent a shock through the light. Mona went on. "They did it to reclaim their story. And when I found out, I didn't stop them. I helped finish it. I was the collective." Gasps filled social media live chats. Millions were typing at once. Mona smiled faintly, watching the invisible chaos unfold in real time. "You thought I vanished because I was destroyed," she said, "but I was editing. I was finishing what we started." The screen flashed again. New footage. Modern-day interviews with all 4 cast members filmed over the past few months. Rashida, "She gave us ownership. That's real power." Kirk, "For once, I wasn't edited into the villain." Jasmine, "People saw me cry for the first time, not just fight." Kay. Michelle, "We didn't just survive her story. We rewrote it." The footage faded to black. Then came Mona's voice one last time. "The truth isn't a single story. It's a collaboration between every version of yourself. The one you show the world, and the one you hide. So maybe this was never about me. Maybe it was about all of us learning how to own our narrative." The screen went dark again, but faint text appeared. "Produced by the collective, founded by Mona Scott." For a moment, the world was silent. Then, an explosion of reaction. Tears, applause, disbelief. admiration. Critics called it the most meta ending in television history. Others accused her of manipulation one last time, but everyone agreed it was genius. The following week, Mona appeared on Oprah's Next Chapter. Sitting in a serene garden, she smiled and said, "The only way to end a reality show is to make people question what reality even is." The episode closed with Oprah asking, "So is this really the end?" Mona laughed. Endings are good for ratings, but truth is endless. And with that, she walked away from the camera one final time, sunlight cutting across her face, leaving behind a legacy not of controversy, but of conversation. Months later, a quiet upload appeared on the Collective's verified channel. No fanfare, no hash, just a blank thumbnail titled Truth Never Dies, Episode 1. And as millions clicked play, one thing became clear: the cameras never stopped. They were just waiting for the world to be ready again. The screen opened slowly, a faint hum, the sound of a heartbeat, and a voice that everyone instantly recognized. It was Mona's, but different, slower, deeper, more reflective. "You thought the story was over," she said, her tone almost like a whisper. "But stories like ours don't end, they evolve." The frame widened to reveal a sleek minimalist studio. No VH1 logos, no glam sets, no neon lights, just a single circle of chairs. 5 of them. And sitting in those chairs, facing each other in silence, were Mona Scott, Rashida, Kirk K., Michelle, and Jasmine Washington. The world froze again. This was the reunion nobody thought would ever happen, the real one. Mona broke the silence first. "No producers, no scripts, no edits. This is live, and whatever happens here," she gestured around the circle, "is final." Michelle leaned forward, eyes sharp. "So this is it, your last redemption tour?" Mona smiled faintly. "Maybe it's all of ours." For a long moment, no one spoke. The air felt heavy, not with anger this time, but with everything left unsaid after years of chaos, betrayal, forgiveness, and survival. Rashida looked at Jasmine, and for the first time since the scandals began, she didn't look at her like a rival. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think you ruined my life, but I think I needed someone to force me to see what my life had become." Jasmine blinked, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was young. I wanted to matter to someone." "You did," Kirk said quietly, surprising everyone. "You just didn't realize how much power you already had." Mona nodded slowly, watching the words hang in the air. "You all had power. I just didn't know how to give it to you without losing control." Michelle laughed bitterly. "Control. That's the word that's haunted all of us. You built your empire on it, and I spent years trying to break free from it." "And did you?" Mona asked gently. Michelle met her eyes. "Yeah," she said, "but it cost me everything first." The camera cut to close-ups, raw, unfiltered emotions written across each face. Tears, smiles, guilt, release. Mona turned toward the lens. "For years, people said I created chaos for profit. Maybe I did, but here's what they never understood. Chaos is honest. People fake calm, but they don't fake breakdowns. I didn't exploit them. I amplified what was already real." Rashida shook her head. "Nah, Mona, you did exploit us, but we let you, because we were scared to disappear." The room fell silent again. Then Jasmine whispered, "But now we don't need you to tell our stories anymore." Mona nodded slowly, a sad smile crossing her face. "I know." Then she reached under her chair and pulled out a small envelope. She handed one to each of them. "These," she said, "are your final rights. Every clip, every confessional, every unseen tape, it's yours now. No network owns you anymore." Michelle's lip trembled as she opened hers. This really means it's over." "Or," Mona said quietly, "it means you can start again without me." The feed cut to black for a few seconds. Then the scene reopened months later, each of them in different places. Rashida smiling in her store, greeting fans but looking peaceful. Kirk hosting a small podcast about relationships. No producers, no script. Michelle performing on stage with a monologue before her song. Raw, soulful, no auto-tune. Jasmine running a non-profit helping women in entertainment understand contract law. And Mona, sitting alone in her editing suite, watching clips of them all proud, nostalgic, at peace. Her phone buzzed, a notification. New video uploaded by the Collective. She smiled, pressed play, and leaned back as a new generation of faces appeared. Young women, new stories, new voices. "This is who we are," said a voice in the trailer. "Not characters, not cast, creators." Mona whispered to herself. "Good." The final frame showed her reflection in the monitor, fading as the words appeared. "The Collective will return." The screen faded to black. No music. No logo. No end credits. Just silence. And across the internet, one final hashtag began to rise like wildfire. Hashtag the final season. No one knew if it was a teaser, an ending, or the start of something even bigger. But in the world Mona Scott built, where truth and story blurred forever, silence was never really the end. It was just the pause before the next episode. And now you've seen it all. The chaos, the confessions, the tears, the truth, and the transformation. What started as a scandal turned into a revolution. Mona Scott didn't just build a TV empire. She created a mirror that showed every side of fame, the pain, the ambition, the betrayal, the forgiveness. From Kirk and Rashida's fractured love to Jasmine's redemption. From Michelle's fearless honesty to Mona's own reckoning. Every story came full circle. But even now, one question still burns brighter than ever. Was this the end of reality, or just the start of something realer than television ever dared to be? As the cameras fade to black and the lights finally dim, you have to ask yourself, what do you believe? Was Mona the villain who manipulated lives for profit? Or the visionary who exposed how entertainment and emotion can collide in one unforgettable storm? Was the collective a rebellion against the system, or just another masterpiece of controlled chaos? Maybe the truth lives somewhere in between, in that space where real life meets production, where every cut hides a deeper story. One thing's for sure, this journey changed everyone involved. It made us question what authenticity even means in a world where everyone is performing for a lens. It forced us to see that even behind the edits, there are real hearts breaking, real people healing, and real lessons about power, ownership, and truth. And maybe, just maybe, it made us realize that we're all part of the show. Because every time we click, comment, and share, we keep the story alive. So here's your moment now. If you've followed this far, through the drama, the mystery, the leaks, the redemption, then you're part of this too. Hit that like button if you felt the emotion, share this video if you believe in second chances, and subscribe if you want to see where the story goes next. Because the collective isn't done yet. There are new stories to tell, new truths to uncover, and new voices ready to rise. Drop a comment below and tell us what you think. Who do you believe? What side are you on? And what does reality even mean to you after everything you've seen? Was Mona's confession redemption or strategy? Do you think she planned the leaks from the beginning? Or did the chaos finally set her free? Your thoughts, your theories, your voice. That's what keeps this alive. Because this isn't just a video, it's history being rewritten in real time. The empire didn't fall, it evolved. And now, you're part of the evolution. So don't just watch. Engage, question, think. Be part of the movement that changes how we see truth, fame, and the people behind the screen. Thank you for watching, for feeling, for staying till the end. But remember, in the world of Mona Scott and the collective, there's never truly an end. Only a new beginning, waiting for its next episode. Stay tuned, stay curious, and as always, keep your eyes open, because the next story might already be recording.